My name is Maya Johnson, and at 29 years old, I'm the founder and CEO of a groundbreaking biotech company worth over $150 million. But to my family, I've always been the disappointment, the black sheep who chose science over tradition. When my younger sister Emma announced her engagement to the heir of our city's most powerful pharmaceutical empire, I thought it might be a chance to finally bridge the gap between us. I had no idea that attending her wedding would lead me to uncover a conspiracy that would shake the entire industry and force me to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right. If you want to know how I went from being treated like hired help at my own sister's wedding to bringing down $1 billion empire, stick around. Before I begin, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about fighting back when your own family betrays you. Growing up in the Johnson household was like living in a museum, where everything had to be perfect for display. My parents, Robert and Patricia Johnson, owned a successful chain of medical supply stores throughout the Pacific Northwest. Nothing groundbreaking, but profitable enough to afford us a comfortable, upper-middle-class life in suburban Seattle. From the moment my sister Emma was born, 3 years after me, it was clear she was destined to be the family princess while I was relegated to the role of responsible older daughter. Emma was everything my parents wanted in a child: beautiful, charming, socially adept, and perfectly content to follow the path they laid out for her. She excelled at ballet and piano, had a natural gift for making people like her, and never questioned family expectations. I, on the other hand, was the difficult one. While Emma was performing at recitals, I was in my room conducting chemistry, experiments that occasionally resulted in small explosions and permanent stains on my carpet. My parents tolerated my scientific interests as a phase I would eventually outgrow. They expected me to study business, marry well, and help expand the family company. When I announced my intention to major in biochemistry at Stanford, my father's reaction was swift and disapproving. "Maya, you're throwing away a perfectly good future for what? Playing with test tubes? This family has a legacy to maintain." My mother was more subtle but equally dismissive. "Honey, science is such a competitive field for women. Wouldn't you prefer something more practical?" Emma, then 15 and already being courted by sons of prominent families, looked at me with genuine confusion. "Why would you want to do something so hard when you could just take over the stores?" But I had already been accepted to Stanford, with a full academic scholarship, and I was determined to prove them wrong. The day I left for college, my father's parting words were, "Don't come crawling back when reality hits." Those 4 years at Stanford were the first time I felt truly alive. Surrounded by brilliant minds who valued intelligence over social connections, I thrived. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in biochemistry and immediately enrolled in the PhD program. My research focused on developing more effective drug delivery systems for cancer treatments, work that would later form the foundation of my company. During those years, my relationship with my family became increasingly distant. Holiday visits were tense affairs where my achievements were minimized while Emma's social successes were celebrated. When Emma was crowned homecoming queen her senior year, my parents flew to California to drag me home for the celebration. When I published my first paper in a prestigious journal, I got a brief, congratulatory text from my mother. Emma breezed through college at the University of Washington, majoring in communications with a minor in art history. She was social chair of her sorority, dated the captain of the football team, and graduated with a 3.2 GPA to thunderous applause from our parents. Meanwhile, I was completing my dissertation on targeted drug delivery mechanisms, working 18-hour days in the lab, and building the theoretical framework for what would become revolutionary cancer treatment technology. After completing my PhD, I moved to Boston to work at a cutting-edge biotech firm. Within 2 years, I had developed a breakthrough technology that could deliver chemotherapy drugs directly to cancer cells while leaving healthy tissue unharmed. The implications were staggering: more effective treatment with dramatically reduced side effects. When the biotech firm tried to suppress my research because it threatened their existing product lines, I made the decision to strike out on my own. With the help of venture capitalists who understood the potential of my technology, I founded Biologic Solutions at age 26. Within 3 years, we had secured FDA approval for our first product, established partnerships with major hospitals, and were preparing for clinical trials that would revolutionize cancer treatment. Throughout this period, my family remained largely indifferent to my success. My parents still expected me to eventually come to my senses and join the family. Business. Emma had taken a job at a boutique marketing firm that specialized in luxury brands, work that mainly involved planning exclusive events and managing social media for high-end clients. Then, 6 months ago, Emma called with news that changed everything. Maya, you'll never guess what happened. Jonathan proposed. Jonathan Blackwood was the eldest son of Blackwood Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest drug companies in the world. The Blackwood family was practically royalty in pharmaceutical circles, with a fortune estimated at over $3 billion. Jonathan himself was being groomed to take over the company, having earned his MBA from Wharton and worked his way up through various divisions. I had met Jonathan a few times at industry conferences. He was handsome in a generic wealthy air, sort of way, charming when he needed to be, but I had always found him somewhat hollow. He spoke in corporate buzzwords and seemed more interested in maintaining his family's empire than in actual innovation. "That's wonderful, Emma," I said, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice. "When did this happen?" "Last weekend at the charity gala. He got down on one knee right there in front of everyone. The ring is absolutely enormous, Maya. I can't wait for you to see it." My parents were over the moon about the engagement. This was the social coup they had always dreamed of, their daughter marrying into pharmaceutical aristocracy. The wedding was planned for 6 months later, with no expense spared. Emma had always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, and the Blackwood family was more than happy to oblige, seeing it as an opportunity to showcase their wealth and power. The engagement announcement made the society pages of several newspapers with photos of Emma and Jonathan at various exclusive events. My mother called me weekly with updates about wedding planning, guest lists, and venue selections, always making sure to mention how impressed the Blackwood family was with Emma's grace and beauty. "They're having the ceremony at the Blackwood estate," she gushed during one call. 500 guests, Maya. The governor is coming, along with half the state legislature. Emma is going to be such a beautiful bride. I congratulated her appropriately and tried to feel genuinely happy for my sister. But something nagged at me about the whole situation. Jonathan had always struck me as calculating, and the speed of the engagement seemed suspicious. In the pharmaceutical industry, marriages between prominent families were often as much about business alliances as romance. My suspicions were confirmed during a conversation with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a colleague, who had worked at Blackwood Pharmaceuticals before joining my company. We were discussing potential partnerships when she mentioned the Blackwood-Johnson engagement. "Your sister, right?" "Interesting timing," she said, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Well, Blackwood has been struggling lately. Several of their major drugs are going off patent in the next 2 years, and they haven't developed anything significant to replace them. Word is they're looking for innovative companies to acquire or partner with. Your family's medical supply connections could be valuable for distribution networks." The pieces started falling into place. A marriage between Emma and Jonathan wouldn't just be a social alliance. It would potentially give Blackwood Pharmaceuticals access to our family's established medical supply relationships, which could be crucial for launching new products. But there was another possibility that made my blood run cold. Blackwood had been one of the companies that had expressed interest in acquiring my research when I was still working for my previous employer. If they couldn't buy my technology, legitimately, marrying into my family might give them access to inside information about my company's plans and research. I decided to keep my suspicions to myself, hoping I was wrong and that Emma had genuinely found love with Jonathan. The wedding invitation arrived 3 weeks later, an elaborate affair with gold embossing and premium cardstock that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The invitation included a personal note from Emma. "Maya, I know we haven't always been close, but this day means everything to me. I hope you can put aside work long enough to celebrate with your little sister. Love, Emma." Despite my reservations, I was touched by her words. Maybe this could be an opportunity to rebuild our relationship. I called to RSVP and congratulate her again. "I'm so glad you're coming," Emma said, sounding genuinely excited. "Jonathan is looking forward to meeting you properly. He's heard so much about your success." "All good things, I hope," I replied with a laugh. "Of course, though Mom did mention you might be able to give him some advice about the industry, since you're both in pharmaceuticals." Another red flag, but I pushed it aside. Maybe I was being overly paranoid. The week before the wedding, I flew back to Seattle and checked into a downtown hotel rather than staying with my parents. I needed space to prepare for what would undoubtedly be an emotional weekend, and I had several work calls scheduled that required privacy. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Blackwood family's private club, an exclusive establishment that screamed old money with its mahogany paneling, crystal chandeliers, and portraits of distinguished dead white men. I arrived fashionably on time, wearing a conservative navy dress that I hoped would help me blend into the background. The guest list was a who's who of Seattle society: politicians, business leaders, and pharmaceutical executives. I recognized several faces from industry publications and conferences, including some who had tried to poach my research or discredit my work in the past. Emma looked radiant in a designer cocktail dress, her engagement ring catching the light as she gestured animatedly while speaking with guests. Jonathan stood beside her, playing the perfect doting fiancé, but I noticed his attention wandering frequently to conversations about business and politics. My parents were in their element, basking in the reflected glory of their daughters. Advantageous match. My mother had clearly spent a fortune on a new wardrobe for the occasion, and my father was working the room like a politician, making connections and dropping hints about potential business opportunities. I found myself standing, alone near the bar, observing the social dynamics at play. That's when Thomas Blackwood, Jonathan's father and CEO of Blackwood Pharmaceuticals, approached me. "You must be Maya Johnson," he said, extending his hand with a politician's smile. "I've heard remarkable things about your company. Quite impressive. What you've built at such a young age." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Congratulations on Jonathan and Emma's engagement." "Yes, we're delighted to welcome Emma into our family. Such a charming girl, and from such a well-connected family." His emphasis on well-connected was unmistakable. "I understand you've developed some groundbreaking cancer treatment technologies." "We've had some success in targeted drug delivery systems," I replied cautiously. "Fascinating field. In fact, we've been looking at expanding our oncology division. Perhaps we should discuss potential collaboration opportunities, family helping family, as they say." Before I could respond, Jonathan appeared at his father's side, wrapping an arm around me in an overly familiar gesture. "Dad, I see you've met my brilliant future sister-in-law. Maya, I've been looking forward to talking shop with you. Emma says you might have some insights into emerging market opportunities." I extricated myself from his embrace politely. "I'm flattered by your interest, but I'm trying to keep this weekend focused on celebrating Emma." Of course," Thomas said smoothly. "But perhaps after the honeymoon we could arrange a more formal meeting. I'm sure there are synergies we could explore." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with both Thomas and Jonathan probing for information about my company's plans, research pipeline, and financial situation. They were skilled at making their questions seem casual, but I recognized a corporate intelligence gathering operation when I saw one. As the evening progressed, I overheard fragments of conversations that confirmed my worst suspicions. Thomas was discussing acquisition strategies with other pharmaceutical executives, mentioning the importance of strategic family relationships in gaining competitive advantages. Jonathan was heard explaining to a colleague how marriage could provide unprecedented access to emerging technologies. My sister, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the undercurrents of calculation surrounding her wedding. She floated through the party like a princess at her own ball, accepting congratulations and compliments with genuine joy. Part of me envied her innocence, but a larger part worried about what she was walking into. The evening concluded with toasts from both families. My father's speech emphasized the joining of two successful business families, while Thomas Blackwood spoke eloquently about the power of partnership and shared vision. Neither mentioned love or personal happiness, focusing instead on legacy and mutual benefit. That night, I lay awake in my hotel room, troubled by what I had witnessed. I was beginning to see the wedding not as a celebration of love, but as a carefully orchestrated business merger, with my sister as the unwitting centerpiece. The next morning brought the wedding day itself. I arrived at the Blackwood estate early, as requested, to help with final preparations. The property was stunning, a sprawling mansion set on 50 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, with gardens that belonged in a magazine spread. Emma was in the bridal suite, surrounded by hairstylists, makeup artists, and a small army of attendants. She looked absolutely radiant, her happiness infectious despite my concerns about her groom's motivations. "Maya," she squealed when she saw me. "You look beautiful. Is that the dress you picked out for today?" I was wearing an elegant burgundy dress that I had carefully selected to be appropriate but not attention-grabbing. "Yes, I hope it works for the photos." "It's perfect." "Listen, I have a small favor to ask. Jonathan's mother is feeling overwhelmed with hosting duties, and they're short-staffed in the cocktail area. Would you mind helping serve drinks during the pre-ceremony reception? It would mean so much to me." I blinked in surprise. "You want me to work as a server at your wedding?" Emma's smile faltered slightly. "It's not working exactly, more like family helping out. You know how important it is that everything goes perfectly. The Blackwoods have been so generous with everything, and I want to show them how wonderful our family is." Before I could respond, Patricia Blackwood, Jonathan's mother, swept into the room. She was an imposing woman in her 60s with perfectly coiffed silver hair and the kind of jewelry that required its own insurance policy. "Emma, darling, you look absolutely divine," she said, air-kissing my sister's cheeks. "Maya, how lovely to see you again. Emma mentioned you'd be helping with the service today. Such a thoughtful gesture from family." "I'm not sure I understand," I said carefully. "What exactly would this involve?" "Oh, nothing too demanding," Patricia replied with a wave of her manicured hand. "Simply circulating with champagne trays during the pre-ceremony reception. We're expecting several very important guests, and presentation is crucial. I'm sure someone with your professional background understands the importance of making the right impression." The request was insulting on multiple levels, but Emma was looking at me with pleading eyes. This was her wedding day, and despite everything, I didn't want to cause a scene that would mar her happiness. "Of course," I heard myself saying. "Whatever you need." Emma's relief was palpable. "Thank you so much, Maya. You're the best sister ever." Patricia handed me a server's uniform, a simple black dress with a white apron and a small nameplate. "The other servers are setting up in the kitchen. They'll brief you on the procedures." I found myself in the mansion's industrial kitchen, surrounded by professional catering staff who looked as confused as I felt about my presence. The head caterer, a no-nonsense woman named Rosa, gave me a quick rundown of serving protocols and assigned me to the champagne station. "You seem overqualified for this," she observed as she showed me how to balance the trays properly. "It's a family favor," I replied, not wanting to explain the complex dynamics at play. As guests began arriving for the pre-ceremony reception, I found myself circulating through the crowd with trays of champagne, smiling politely as pharmaceutical. Executives and society matrons took glasses without really seeing me. It was surreal, moving invisibly through a gathering of people I had shared conversations with just the night before, now reduced to hired help in their eyes. But the anonymity also gave me an unexpected advantage. As a server, I became practically invisible to the guests, allowing me to overhear conversations that would have been impossible to access otherwise, and what I heard made my blood run cold. Standing near the French doors leading to the garden, Thomas Blackwood was deep in conversation with several other pharmaceutical executives, their voices low but audible to someone serving drinks nearby. "The Johnson girl is perfect," Thomas was saying. "Beautiful, malleable, and comes with exactly the connections we need. The family's medical supply network will give us direct access to hospitals and clinics throughout the region." "And the sister?" asked another man I recognized as the CEO of a competing firm. "The one with the biotech company?" "That's the real prize," Thomas replied with a cold smile. "Maya Johnson has developed technology that could be worth billions, but her company is still small enough to be vulnerable. Once Jonathan is married into the family, we'll have insider access to their research, their business plans, their financial situation. It won't take much to engineer a takeover." "Industrial espionage through marriage," the other executive chuckled. "Brilliant." "Not espionage," Thomas corrected. "Family consultation. Perfectly legal and completely devastating to our competitors." I felt sick to my stomach as the implications became clear. This wasn't just about acquiring my family's distribution network. It was a calculated plan to steal my life's work and destroy my company. Emma's marriage was the Trojan horse they intended to use to infiltrate and eliminate me as a competitor, but the conversation wasn't over. "What about the cancer drug patents?" another voice asked. "Already in motion," Thomas replied. "We've been developing our own version of the targeted delivery system. Once we have access to Maya's research through family channels, we can accelerate our timeline and file for comprehensive patents that will make her technology obsolete. By the time she realizes what's happening, we'll own the entire market." The group moved away, but I had heard enough. They weren't just planning to use Emma's marriage to gain competitive intelligence. They were actively working to steal my research and destroy my company through patent manipulation. Everything I had worked for, all the years of research and development, the potential to save countless cancer patients, all of it was being threatened by this elaborate scheme. I continued serving drinks mechanically, my mind racing as I processed what I had learned. Emma genuinely loved Jonathan, but he was using her as an unwitting accomplice in corporate espionage. My parents, so eager for social advancement, had no idea they were facilitating the destruction of their other daughter's life work and the why. Ceremony time approached. I was directed to help with the transition from cocktail reception to wedding service. Guests were being seated in the garden pavilion, a stunning outdoor venue decorated with thousands of white flowers and crystal chandeliers suspended from the trees. I was assigned to work the service station set up behind the seating area, ensuring water glasses were filled and programs distributed. From this position, I had a clear view of the entire ceremony and could continue to observe the key players. The wedding procession began with a string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon. Emma's bridesmaids walked down the petal-strewn aisle in flowing lavender dresses, followed by the flower girl scattering rose petals. Then came Emma herself, radiant in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's cars, walking arm in arm with our father. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale, her face glowing with happiness as she approached the altar where Jonathan waited with his trademark charming smile. The officiant, a prominent local minister who had officiated weddings for several powerful families, began the ceremony with words about love, commitment, and the joining of two families. But all I could think about was the conversation I had overheard. As the minister spoke about honesty and trust in marriage, I knew that the groom was already planning to betray his bride's family. As vows were exchanged about supporting each other through all challenges, I realized that Jonathan's support would extend only as far as it served his family's corporate interests. The ceremony concluded with thunderous applause as the new Mr. and Mrs. Jonathan Blackwood kissed and walked back down the aisle. Emma's smile could have powered the city, and even I felt a moment of genuine happiness for her before reality crashed back in. During the cocktail hour following the ceremony, I continued my serving duties while keeping my ears open for more intelligence. The conversations I overheard confirmed my worst fears. Blackwood Pharmaceuticals was not just planning a hostile takeover of my company. They were orchestrating a systematic destruction of the entire targeted drug delivery market to maintain their dominance in traditional chemotherapy drugs. My breakthrough technology threatened to make their existing oncology products obsolete, potentially costing them billions in revenue. Rather than compete through innovation, they had chosen to eliminate the competition through corporate espionage and patent manipulation. As dinner service began, I was assigned to work one of the VIP tables where Thomas Blackwood was seated with other pharmaceutical executives and their wives. The conversation had shifted to post-wedding plans and business opportunities. "Jonathan and Emma will be honeymooning in Europe for 3 weeks," Thomas was telling the table. "When they return, we'll begin the integration process. Maya Johnson has been invited to several family dinners where business will naturally come up." "How much does she suspect?" asked one of the wives, a sharp-eyed woman who I recognized as the former head of marketing for a major drug company. "Nothing. As far as we can tell, she's brilliant in the lab but naive about corporate politics. Emma has already agreed to invite her to Sunday dinners where family business is discussed openly." My hands shook as I refilled water glasses, barely managing to maintain my composure. Emma had unknowingly agreed to participate in the intelligence gathering that would destroy my company. Worse, she would probably never realize how she had been used until it was too late. The evening progressed with toasts, dancing, and celebration. Emma and Jonathan performed their first dance to "At Last" by Etta James, looking every inch the perfect couple. My parents beamed with pride as they were introduced to pharmaceutical royalty and political figures. Everyone was playing their rolls perfectly in this elaborate charade. But I had heard enough. As the party moved into full swing, I slipped away from my serving duties and found a quiet corner where I could think. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Blackwood Pharmaceuticals was using Emma's marriage to gain access to insider information that would allow them to destroy my company and steal my research. I had two choices: remain silent and allow my life's work to be stolen, or expose the truth and destroy Emma's wedding day and possibly her marriage. Neither option was appealing, but I knew I couldn't stand by and watch my research, technology that could save countless lives, be perverted for corporate greed. I made my decision. Returning to the kitchen, I found Rosa, the head caterer, and asked to borrow her tablet to check on a work emergency. What I actually did was access my company's secure cloud storage and download several files that would prove my suspicions about Blackwood's corporate espionage plans. Then I returned to the reception with a new purpose. Instead of serving drinks, I began positioning myself near key conversations and discreetly recording them on my phone. The acoustics in the garden pavilion were excellent, and the guests were relaxed enough by alcohol and celebration to speak more freely than they might have otherwise. Over the next hour, I gathered audio evidence of Thomas Blackwood discussing plans to steal my research, Jonathan bragging about his brilliant strategy for gaining inside access to my company, and several other pharmaceutical executives confirming their participation in the scheme. But the most damning evidence came during the father of the groom speech. Thomas Blackwood took the microphone during dinner, ostensibly to toast the happy couple. His speech was polished and seemingly heartfelt, praising Emma's beauty and grace while welcoming her into the Blackwood family. But near the end, he made a comment that sealed his fate. "Marriage is about partnership in all things," he said, raising his champagne glass. "Emma brings not just her own wonderful qualities to our family, but connections that will benefit all of us for generations to come. Jonathan has chosen wisely, a bride who will open doors we never could have imagined." The pharmaceutical executives in the audience smiled knowingly. Emma beamed with pride, thinking her father-in-law was simply praising her social connections. But I understood the real meaning. Emma was being valued primarily for her utility in corporate espionage. That was the moment I decided to act. I waited until the official toasts were complete and the band had started playing again. Most of the guests were either dancing or engaged in conversation, the perfect time for what I had planned. I approached the band leader during a break between songs and made a request that raised his eyebrows. "Are you sure about this, miss? This is a pretty serious crowd." "I'm the bride's sister," I assured him. "Just give me 5 minutes." He looked uncertain but handed over the microphone. I had spent years presenting research findings to skeptical audiences, defending my work against corporate attacks, and building a company from nothing. If I could face down hostile pharmaceutical executives in boardrooms, I could handle a wedding reception. The band stopped playing, and I tapped the microphone to get everyone's attention. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Maya Johnson, Emma's sister." I spotted Emma at the head table, looking surprised but pleased that I was making a speech. Jonathan appeared less enthusiastic, his corporate instincts perhaps warning him that something was off. "I wanted to share a little story about sisterhood and family loyalty," I continued, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet pavilion. "You see, I've learned something interesting today about what family really means to some people." Thomas Blackwood was frowning now, clearly sensing that this was not going to be a typical wedding toast. Several of the pharmaceutical executives were exchanging nervous glances. "I work in biotechnology, developing treatments for cancer patients. It's not the most glamorous work, mostly long hours in laboratories, clinical trials, regulatory approvals. But it's important work because it saves lives." Emma was nodding encouragingly, still unaware of where this was heading. "What I discovered today is that some people in the pharmaceutical industry see my work differently. They see it as a threat to their profits, and they're willing to go to extraordinary lengths to eliminate that threat." Now I had everyone's attention. The garden pavilion was dead silent except for the rustle of evening breeze through the trees. I've spent this evening serving drinks and listening to conversations that weren't meant for my ears. Conversations about corporate espionage, patent theft, and the systematic destruction of innovative medical research. Conversations about using family connections to gain insider access to proprietary information. Thomas Blackwood stood up abruptly. That's quite enough. This is neither the time nor the place for business discussions. You're absolutely right, I replied sweetly. Weddings should be about love and commitment, not corporate espionage. So let me ask you, Mr. Blackwood, does your son love my sister? Or does he love the business opportunities she represents? Emma's face had gone pale. Maya, what are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system. Let me share some of the conversations I recorded this evening, starting with your new father-in-law explaining how your marriage will give Blackwood Pharmaceuticals insider access to my company's research. The first audio clip played clearly through the speakers. Thomas Blackwood's voice discussing plans to use Emma's family connections to steal my technology. The crowd listened in stunned silence as the scope of the scheme became clear. Emma's hand flew to her mouth in horror. That can't be real. Jonathan, tell them it's not real. Jonathan's face had turned an interesting shade of red. Maya, you're taking things out of context. Family businesses help each other all the time. Family businesses, yes, I agreed. But industrial espionage is illegal, regardless of family relationships. I played another clip. Jonathan bragging about his strategy for gaining access to my company's proprietary information through family dinners and casual conversations with his new sister-in-law. My parents looked shell-shocked. My mother was gripping my father's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. The pharmaceutical executives were beginning to move toward the exits, clearly wanting to distance themselves from the disaster unfolding, but I wasn't finished. Here's my personal favorite, I announced, queuing up the final audio clip. Mr. Blackwood explaining how they've already developed competing technology and plan to use stolen information from my research to file patents that will make my work obsolete. As Thomas Blackwood's voice filled the pavilion, describing in detail the patent manipulation scheme, Emma let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She turned to Jonathan, her wedding dress rustling dramatically. Is this true? Have you been lying to me this entire time? Jonathan's composure finally cracked. Emma, please, let me explain. Business is complicated. This doesn't change how I feel about you. How you feel about me? Emma's voice rose to a pitch I'd never heard before. You just got caught planning to destroy my sister's life work, and you want to talk about feelings? The scene was spiraling into chaos. Guests were pulling out their phones, some recording the confrontation, others calling for cars to make quick exits. Thomas Blackwood was frantically trying to reach his legal team. Several of the pharmaceutical executives had already disappeared into the night, but Emma wasn't done. My gentle, socially gracious sister transformed before my eyes into a force of nature. She ripped off her wedding veil and threw it at Jonathan's feet. You used me, she said, her voice shaking with rage. You made me feel like I was the luckiest woman in the world, and all along I was just part of a business plan. Emma, please, Jonathan started. No, she cut him off. Maya, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I would never, ever have agreed to help them hurt you. I believed her. Despite everything, I could see that Emma's shock and horror were genuine. She had been as much a victim of the Blackwood family's manipulation as I was. I know, I told her gently. You're not responsible for their deception. Emma turned back to Jonathan, her eyes blazing. Get away from me. Get away from my family. This marriage is over before it even began. You can't be serious, Jonathan protested. Think about what you're giving up. The social connections, the financial security. I'm thinking about my integrity, Emma shot back. Something you clearly know nothing about. Thomas Blackwood tried one last desperate gambit. This is all a misunderstanding. Maya, surely we can work something out. Your research combined with our resources could benefit everyone. The only thing that would benefit everyone, I replied, is if your company focused on developing your own innovations instead of stealing other people's work. I pulled out a business card and handed it to him. That's my attorney's contact information. He'll be filing complaints with the FDA, the FTC, and the Patent Office on Monday morning. I suggest you get your legal affairs in order. The party was effectively over. Guests were streaming toward the exits, many of them pulling out phones to call their own lawyers or damage control specialists. The pharmaceutical executives who had been part of the scheme were facing potential criminal charges for conspiracy and corporate espionage. Emma had retreated to the bridal suite to change out of her wedding dress, aided by several bridesmaids who were furious on her behalf. My parents approached me hesitantly, clearly unsure how to process what had just happened. "Maya," my father began, "I had no idea about any of this business with your company." "I know, Dad. They were using all of us." My mother was crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, honey. I pushed so hard for this marriage because I thought it would be good for Emma. I never imagined—" "It's not your fault either," I assured her. "The Blackwood family are experts at manipulation. They've probably done this before." As I gathered my things to leave, Emma appeared in jeans and a sweater, her elaborate wedding makeup smeared, but her expression determined. "Maya, wait. I want to come with you." "Where?" "Anywhere but here. I can't stay in this house another minute, and I need to figure out how to rebuild my life after this disaster." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, for the first time in years. Stripped of the designer gown and society princess facade, she looked young and vulnerable but also strong. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also revealed her true character. "You can stay at my hotel tonight," I offered. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." As we walked away from the Blackwood estate, leaving behind the ruins of what was supposed to be the social event of the year, Emma took my hand. "I know I haven't been a good sister," she said quietly. "I let Mom and Dad's favoritism go to my head, and I never really appreciated how hard you've worked or how much you've achieved." "Emma." "No, let me finish. What happened tonight was horrible, but it also showed me something important. You're not just successful in business. You have integrity. You could have stayed quiet and let them steal your research to avoid ruining my wedding. But you chose to do the right thing, even though you knew it would hurt me." I squeezed her hand. "I couldn't let them destroy work that could save lives, Emma. And I couldn't let them use you to do it. I understand that now. And I want you to know that whatever happens next, I'm on your side. If you need someone to testify about what they told me, or if there's any way I can help with the legal case, I'm there." That was the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. The scandal made headlines throughout the pharmaceutical industry and beyond. "Wedding Crasher Exposes Corporate Espionage Ring" was the headline in several business publications. The social media coverage was brutal for the Blackwood family, with hashtags like #MyBlackwoodEspionage and WeddingGate trending for weeks. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. Thomas Blackwood hired the most expensive crisis management firm in Seattle, but the damage was already done. The audio recordings I had made were crystal clear, and several of the pharmaceutical executives who had been caught on tape began cooperating with federal investigators to reduce their own potential criminal liability. Within 48 hours of the Easy wedding disaster, the FBI had opened an investigation into Blackwood Pharmaceuticals' business practices. The Securities and Exchange Commission launched their own inquiry into potential securities fraud, since the company had been misleading shareholders about their research and development capabilities while planning to steal technology from competitors. Emma moved into my hotel suite that first night, and we stayed up until dawn, talking through everything that had happened. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had as adults, and it revealed just how much the Blackwood family had manipulated her throughout the engagement. "They made me feel so special," she said, curled up in the hotel bathrobe with a cup of tea. "Jonathan would take me to these exclusive events, and his parents would introduce me to all these important people. But now I realize they were grooming me, weren't they? Getting me comfortable with the idea that family business was just casual dinner conversation." "That's exactly what they were doing," I confirmed. "They needed you to trust them completely, so you'd share information without realizing it was valuable." Emma shuddered. "I told them about your company's expansion plans, Maya. Last month at dinner, when Patricia asked how you were doing, I mentioned that you were looking at facilities in 3 new states. I thought I was just being proud of your success." "Emma, you had no way of knowing." "But I should have known," she interrupted. "I should have been more protective of your work, more suspicious of their sudden interest in family business. I was so blinded by the fairy tale romance that I didn't see the manipulation." I moved to sit beside her on the couch. "The manipulation was expertly done. They've probably used similar tactics before. You're not naive for believing that someone loved you. Over the following days, the scope of the Blackwood family's corporate espionage became clear. The FBI investigation revealed that they had used similar marriage-based schemes at least 3 times before, targeting smaller biotech companies whose innovations threatened their market dominance. In each case, a Blackwood heir had courted and married someone connected to the target company, gaining access to proprietary information that was then used to develop competing products or file blocking patents. The pattern was always the same. Identify a vulnerable company with promising technology, research the founder's family connections, initiate a romantic relationship with someone who could provide insider access, and then systematically gather intelligence while maintaining the facade of family business discussions. Emma and I were not their first victims, just their most public failure. My attorney, David Richardson, was in his element handling the legal fallout. A former federal prosecutor who specialized in corporate crime, he had built his private practice around cases involving intellectual property theft and industrial espionage. This is the most comprehensive evidence package I've ever seen for a corporate espionage case, he told me during our first official meeting. The audio recordings, the pattern of prior marriages, the documented attempts to file competing patents. It's a prosecutor's dream. What kind of timeline are we looking at? I asked. Criminal charges could be filed within weeks. The civil lawsuit will take longer, but with this evidence, I expect Blackwood will want to settle rather than face a public trial. He was right about the criminal charges. 2 weeks after the wedding, Thomas Blackwood, Jonathan, and 4 other pharmaceutical executives were indicted on federal charges including conspiracy, wire fraud, and violation of the Economic Espionage Act. The indictment made front-page news in the Wall Street Journal and sent shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry. The civil lawsuit was equally devastating. We filed claims for attempted theft of trade secrets, conspiracy, intentional, infliction of emotional distress, and violation of state unfair competition laws. The damages we sought were in the hundreds of millions, reflecting not just the value of my stolen research, but also the market disruption and emotional trauma caused by their scheme. But the most satisfying development was the market response. Blackwood Pharmaceuticals' stock price crashed by 60% in the first week after the scandal broke. Several major institutional investors pulled out entirely, and 3 separate class action lawsuits were filed by shareholders who claimed they had been defrauded by the company's misleading statements about research and development. Meanwhile, my own company's profile skyrocketed. The publicity around the case had highlighted the innovative nature of my cancer treatment technology, leading to inquiries from hospitals and research institutions around the world. Our stock price tripled, and we received acquisition offers that valued the company at over $500 million. Emma proved to be an invaluable witness in the criminal case. Her testimony about the Blackwood family's manipulation tactics was devastating, particularly her account of how they had coached her to gather information during casual family conversations. They made it seem like they were just being good in-laws, she testified during Thomas Blackwood's preliminary hearing. Patricia would ask about Maya's work in this caring, motherly way, and then Thomas would follow up with more specific questions about market opportunities and competitive advantages. They made me believe I was helping bring the families closer together. The judge was clearly disturbed by the testimony. During his ruling denying bail for Thomas Blackwood, he noted that the scheme showed a level of premeditation and manipulation that suggests a continuing danger to potential victims and witnesses. Jonathan's case was more complex because of his personal relationship with Emma, but ultimately no less damaging. Emma's testimony about their private conversations revealed that he had been gathering intelligence throughout their entire relationship, not just after the engagement. He would ask me about Maya's work schedules, her business trips, who she was meeting with, Emma testified, her voice steady but her hands shaking. He said he wanted to understand my family better so he could support me. I thought it was sweet that he cared so much about my relationship with my sister. The defense attorneys tried to argue that Jonathan genuinely loved Emma and that the business intelligence gathering was secondary to the romantic relationship. But the prosecution had recorded phone calls between Jonathan and his father where he referred to Emma as the target and discussed extraction timelines for obtaining my research data. Those recordings were played in open court, And I watched Emma's face crumble as she heard the man she had planned to spend her life with discuss their relationship in terms of corporate strategy and asset acquisition. It was brutal, but it was also necessary for the truth to come out, fully. The trial lasted 3 months, and the media coverage was relentless. Every day brought new revelations about the pharmaceutical industry's competitive practices and the lengths to which some companies would go to maintain market dominance. I testified for 2 days about my research, the development of my company, and the potential impact of the stolen technology on cancer treatment advancement. The prosecution wanted the jury to understand not just the financial crimes involved, but also the broader implications for medical progress and patient care. My technology could reduce chemotherapy side effects by up to 90% while maintaining treatment effectiveness, I explained to the jury. The delay caused by this corporate espionage scheme could cost thousands of cancer patients their lives while these companies fight over market share instead of focusing on innovation. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Thomas Blackwood was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $50 million in restitution. Jonathan received 8 years and $25 million in fines. The other executives received sentences ranging from 3 to 6 years. But the criminal convictions were just the beginning of the Blackwood family's downfall. The civil lawsuit I had filed proceeded in parallel with the criminal case, and the evidence that had secured criminal convictions made the civil case a foregone conclusion. Blackwood Pharmaceuticals agreed to settle for $200 million plus an agreement to cease all research in targeted drug delivery systems and to license my existing patents for cancer treatment applications. The settlement also included a public apology and an agreement to implement comprehensive ethics training for all employees. The $200 million settlement was life-changing, but more importantly, it sent a clear message to the pharmaceutical industry that corporate espionage would not be tolerated. Several other companies that had been engaging in similar practices quietly reformed their competitive intelligence operations, and industry associations implemented new ethical guidelines for our competitive research. Emma used the experience as a catalyst for her own transformation. She enrolled in law school, focusing on corporate ethics and whistleblower protection. Her first-hand experience with corporate manipulation made her a powerful advocate for transparency in business relationships. "I want to make sure no one else gets used the way I was used," she told me during her first semester. "And I want to help other people find the courage to speak up when they see wrongdoing." She also became actively involved in my company's patient advocacy programs, using her natural social skills to build relationships with cancer support groups and medical professionals. Her work helped bridge the gap between our scientific research and the real-world needs of patients and their families. My parents struggled more with the aftermath of the scandal. The social embarrassment was significant in their community, and they faced criticism for not protecting both their daughters from the Blackwood family's manipulation. But ultimately, the experience forced them to confront their own role in prioritizing social advancement over family relationships. "We were so proud of Emma's engagement to Jonathan," my mother admitted during a family dinner 6 months after the trial. "We never stopped to ask whether he was good enough for her. We were just excited about the social connections and the business opportunities." My father was more blunt in his self-assessment. "I raised you girls to value success and social status above almost everything else. It took this disaster to realize how wrong that was. Maya, you succeeded in spite of our values, not because of them." These conversations were painful, but necessary. The family dynamics that had enabled the Blackwood scheme needed to be addressed if we were going to rebuild genuine relationships with each other. The pharmaceutical industry itself was forced to reckon with the scandal's implications. Congressional hearings were held on competitive practices in the drug development industry, and new regulations were implemented requiring companies to disclose their research partnerships and competitive intelligence activities. Several other cases of corporate espionage were uncovered as a result of the heightened scrutiny, leading to additional prosecutions and industry reforms. The Blackwood case became a watershed moment for business ethics in the pharmaceutical sector. For me, personally, the experience was transformative in unexpected ways. The public attention surrounding the case had made me something of a celebrity in the biotech world, but it also forced me to develop skills in public speaking and media relations that I had never needed as a pure researcher. I found myself testifying before Congress about pharmaceutical industry practices, speaking at business ethics conferences, and serving on advisory boards for organizations focused on corporate transparency. The work was outside my comfort zone, but it was also deeply satisfying to use my experience to prevent similar crimes against other innovators. The success of the legal case also accelerated my company's growth beyond anything I had imagined. The $200 million settlement provided the capital for massive expansion, and the publicity had created demand for our technology from medical institutions worldwide. Within 2 years of the wedding disaster, Biologic Solutions had grown from a small biotech startup to a major player in the cancer treatment field. We opened research facilities in 3 countries, employed over 500 people, and had multiple drugs in clinical trials. But the most meaningful change was in my relationship with Emma. The trauma of discovering Jonathan's betrayal had been devastating for her, but it had also stripped away the superficial dynamics that had defined our sisterhood for decades. "I spent so many years being jealous of your intelligence and your independence," she confessed during one of our regular lunch meetings. "I thought I had chosen the easier path by focusing on social success instead of academic achievement. But you were building something real while I was just playing a role." "We were both playing roles assigned to us by other people's expectations," I replied. "The difference is that you had the courage to walk away from yours when you realized it was based on lies." Emma had indeed shown remarkable courage throughout the entire ordeal. Testifying against the man she had planned to marry, facing public scrutiny about her judgment and naivety, and rebuilding her identity from the ground up, all of it required strength that I'm not sure I would have possessed in her situation. The Blackwood family, meanwhile, faced complete social and financial ruin. Thomas Blackwood's conviction and imprisonment destroyed his reputation in pharmaceutical circles, and the company he had built over decades was effectively finished. They filed for bankruptcy 6 months after the criminal trial, unable to survive. The combination of legal costs, settlement payments, and lost business. Jonathan served his prison sentence and was released after 6 years with good behavior. He attempted to rebuild his career in pharmaceutical consulting, but his name was too closely associated with the espionage scandal for any reputable company to hire him. Last I heard, he was working in medical device sales under an assumed name, a far cry from the pharmaceutical empire he had been destined to inherit. Patricia Blackwood, though not criminally charged, became a social pariah in Seattle's elite circles. The family's philanthropic activities, which had been largely motivated by social positioning rather than genuine altruism, ceased entirely when their financial resources were exhausted by legal costs and settlements. 3 years after the wedding, that never happened, I received an unexpected letter from Jonathan. He was writing from a halfway house where he was completing his transition back to civilian life, and his message was a carefully crafted attempt at apology and reconciliation. "Maya," the letter began, "I know that nothing I can say will undo the harm I caused to you, Emma, and your family. I have spent the past 6 years in prison thinking about the choices I made and the people I hurt in pursuit of what I thought was business success." The letter continued for several pages, detailing his psychological journey through incarceration and his gradual recognition of how completely he had been consumed by his family's toxic corporate culture. I genuinely believed that business was war and that any tactic that wasn't technically illegal was fair game. It took losing everything, my freedom, my reputation, my relationship with Emma, to understand that some victories come at too high a price. He concluded by asking not for forgiveness, which he acknowledged he didn't deserve, but for the chance to somehow make amends for the damage he had caused. I showed the letter to Emma, curious about her reaction. She read it carefully, her expression unreadable. "Do you believe he's sincere?" I asked. Emma was quiet for a long moment before responding. "I think prison probably did change him, but that doesn't erase what he did or make him someone I want in my life. Some apologies are too little, too late." Agreed with her assessment. Jonathan's letter was well-crafted and probably sincere, but it didn't change the fundamental fact that he had built our entire relationship on lies and manipulation. The person Emma had fallen in love with had never actually existed. I filed the letter away without responding, focusing instead on the positive developments in our family's life. Emma had graduated from law school summa cum laude and taken a position with a prestigious firm specializing in corporate ethics and whistleblower protection. Her first major case involved representing a pharmaceutical researcher whose work had been stolen by his former employer, a situation eerily similar to what the Blackwood family had attempted with me. It's like the universe is giving me the chance to fight the same battle from the other side, she told me after winning a $50 million settlement for her client. My parents had used the experience as an opportunity to reassess their own values and priorities. They sold their medical supply business and used the proceeds to establish a foundation focused on supporting women entrepreneurs in healthcare and technology fields. We spent so many years focused on building wealth and social connections, my mother explained when they announced the foundation. But we realized that the most important thing we could do was help other families avoid the mistakes we made. The foundation's first major initiative was a mentorship program, pairing established women business leaders with young entrepreneurs, providing both financial support and guidance for navigating the challenges of building companies in male-dominated industries. As for me, the years following the scandal had been professionally and personally transformative. Biologic Solutions continued to grow, with several of our cancer treatments receiving FDA approval and beginning to save lives in hospitals around the world. But perhaps more importantly, I had learned to balance professional success with personal relationships. The experience of nearly losing my family to corporate manipulation had taught me the value of maintaining connections with people who mattered, even when work demands seemed overwhelming. I had also begun dating again, eventually, meeting Dr. Michael Torres, an oncologist who had been one of the first physicians to use our targeted drug delivery system in clinical trials. Unlike my previous relationships, which had often taken a backseat to business demands, this one was built on mutual respect and shared values about the importance of medical research. Michael understood the demands of my work because he faced similar challenges in his own career, balancing patient care with research responsibilities and administrative duties. More importantly, he had witnessed firsthand the impact of my technology on cancer patients, giving him a deep appreciation for why my work mattered. I've seen patients who were given 6 months to live celebrate their second anniversary of completing treatment, he told me during one of our early conversations. What you've created isn't just a business success. It's a miracle for people who had lost hope. That perspective meant everything to me. For years, I had been focused primarily on the technical and business aspects of drug development. But seeing my work through the eyes of someone who watched patients recover and families reunite gave me a deeper understanding of why I had chosen this path in the first place. 4 years after the wedding scandal, I found myself preparing for a very different kind of celebration, my own wedding to Michael. The ceremony was planned for the following month, and unlike Emma's elaborate society affair, we were keeping things simple and focused on the people who mattered most. The guest list included family, close friends, colleagues who had supported me through the difficult years of building the company, and several of the cancer patients whose lives had been saved by our treatments. It was a gathering of people united not by social status or business connections, but by genuine relationships and shared values. Emma was my maid of honor, a role that would have been unimaginable during the years when our relationship was defined by competition and resentment. But the trauma of the Blackwood scandal had forced us both to grow beyond the limiting dynamics of our childhood, creating space for a genuine sisterhood based on mutual respect and support. "Are you nervous?" she asked as she helped me with final preparations the morning of the wedding. "Surprisingly, no," I replied honestly. "For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm making a decision based entirely on what I want, not what I think I should want or what other people expect of me." The wedding ceremony was held in the garden of my home in Seattle, a property I had purchased after the Blackwood settlement was finalized. The setting was beautiful but not ostentatious, with flowers from local growers and music from a string quartet composed of medical residents who played as a hobby. Michael and I had written our own vows, focusing on the values that had brought us together: commitment to healing, dedication to scientific advancement, and the belief that love and work could complement each other rather than competing for attention. "Maya," Michael said during the ceremony, "you've shown me that it's possible to change the world while building a life worth living. I promise to support your dreams while pursuing our shared vision of a future where medical innovation serves humanity's deepest needs." My vows were equally personal. "Michael, you've taught me that professional success means nothing without people to share it with. I promise to build our marriage with the same dedication I've brought to my research, carefully, thoughtfully, and with complete commitment to the outcome." The reception that followed was relaxed and joyful, with conversations ranging from the latest developments in cancer research to family stories and future plans. Several of the cancer patients who attended shared stories about their treatment experiences and how our technology had changed their lives. One patient, a young mother named Jennifer, had been diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer just 6 months after her daughter was born. Traditional chemotherapy would have left her too weak to care for her child, but our targeted delivery system had allowed her to maintain her strength throughout treatment. I was able to breastfeed my daughter throughout my entire treatment, she told the assembled guests during her impromptu speech. I didn't lose my hair, I didn't spend months in bed recovering from each treatment, and I was able to be present for every milestone in her first year of life. That's what this technology means. Not just survival, but the ability to live fully while fighting for your life. Her words brought tears to my eyes and reminded me why the fight against the Blackwood family had been so important. It wasn't just about protecting my business interests. It was about ensuring that life-saving innovations could reach the people who needed them most. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing in the garden, with Emma, Michael, and my parents, reflecting on how much had changed since that disastrous wedding 4 years earlier. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't overheard those conversations at my wedding? Emma asked. I considered the question carefully. Honestly, I think they would have succeeded in stealing the research. I was naive about corporate espionage, and I probably would have shared information during family dinners without realizing the implications. The technology might have been delayed by years while we fought patent battles, and patients like Jennifer might not have had access to treatment when they needed it most. My father nodded thoughtfully. It took a crisis to make us all see clearly, but maybe that's what was necessary. We were all living in denial about different things: the family dynamics, the business relationships, the importance of ethical behavior over social success. My mother added, I'm proud of both of you girls for having the courage to rebuild, rather than just trying to go back to the way things were before. She was right about the rebuilding aspect. None of us had tried to return to our previous relationships or roles. Instead, we had used the crisis as an opportunity to create something better, more honest, and more sustainable. As Michael and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, a research expedition to study traditional medicinal practices in South America, combining our love of travel with our professional interests, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction about the path my life had taken. The wedding scandal that had seemed like a disaster had actually been a liberation, freeing me from family dynamics that had been limiting my growth and exposing corporate corruption that had been threatening not just my business, but medical progress itself. Emma had found her calling in protecting other whistleblowers and corporate ethics violators. My parents had discovered the satisfaction of using their resources to support other entrepreneurs rather than just accumulating wealth and social status. And I had learned to balance professional achievement with personal relationships, creating a life that was successful on multiple dimensions, rather than just in the laboratory and boardroom. The Blackwood family's scheme had been designed to steal my life's work and destroy my company. Instead, it had exposed their corruption, accelerated my professional success, and forced positive changes throughout the pharmaceutical industry. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be exactly what you needed to reach your full potential. The key is having the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it means disappointing people you love or facing unknown consequences. I learned that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting abuse or enabling destructive behavior. Real love requires honesty, boundaries, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. And sometimes, exposing a lie is the greatest gift you can give to someone you care about, even if they don't appreciate it at the time. As we drove away from the wedding reception, beginning our journey as husband and wife, I felt grateful for every difficult moment that had led to this happiness. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been authentic, and that made all the difference. If you've ever faced a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and doing what's right, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most important breakthroughs, both personally and professionally. Thank you for following my journey, and remember, you have the right to protect your life's work, your values, and your future, even if it means standing up to family members who should have been protecting you instead.